Hello everyone, my name is Waislin Basmayor and my co-presenters are Devin Lorenzo, Jenny Nervasa, Nicole Belmonte, and Travis Lambe, and we are the Anti-Keystone Pipeline Group. Keystone Pipeline is a significant oil pipeline system designed to transport crude oil from Alberta's oil sands in Canada to refineries in the United States. Its primary purpose is to help meet the energy demands of both countries. In this presentation, we will focus on the economic implications of the Keystone Pipeline with a particular emphasis on its relevance to macroeconomics.
Before we go over on why we stand against a pipeline, we must go over on why is a pipeline being built. Using the three fundamental questions, we can figure out what, how, and for whom. The Keystone Pipeline will use energy sources used as transportation fuel for driving, flying, and shipping vehicles. The Keystone Pipeline XL will be an extension of the already existing Keystone Pipeline that stretches to the Gulf Coast of Texas and will then extend all the way to Steel City, Nebraska. The long-term goal of this project is to boost the U.S. economy by creating thousands of private sector jobs, indirect job growth, and large revenues to infrastructure communities. Next, let's discuss why some of these economic goals would be hard to achieve. We primarily see this problem surrounding protection of the environment at both the indigenous level and at the general level. Operations such as mining tar sands, drilling operations, and use of automobile gas tanks could release millions of greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which will directly impact indigenous communities and American lives. As a main water source, the Ogallala Aquifer will be contaminated on top of two main water sources used by indigenous communities. Additionally, this would also violate treaties made between the US government and the indigenous communities, as land will be risk of oil spills where years of culture, history, and religion are held.
Economic growth. A significant issue in the construction industry is the ongoing lack of job opportunities and the widespread cutting of positions across the sector. Many individuals working within the industry face increasing job insecurity as companies frequently reduce their workforce through layoffs, downsizing, and eliminating positions altogether. The constant threat of unemployment, coupled with the lack of stable long term career prospects, creates an environment of uncertainty and instability for those employed in the sector. Given this situation, it becomes increasingly difficult to foster economic growth, as a workplace that is shrinking or struggling to find consistent employment can't fully contribute to the economy. Without a steady workflow in this critical sector, the construction industry itself suffers, and the ripple effect goes down to other industries that rely on construction for infrastructure. Furthermore, widespread layoffs and job cuts lead to reduced customer spending, lower tax revenue, and less overall demand for goods and the services, which in turn reduces economic expansion. Ultimately, these disruptions in employment opportunities within the construction industry not only harm the workers directly, but also pose significant long term challenges for the overall economic future of the country.
Promises of false job opportunities. People believe that the pipeline would increase job growth, but studies show that these claims are either false or short lived. It stated that 100,000 jobs would be created, which will be raised to 500,000 jobs by 2035, and 250,000 in permanent jobs would remain. But according to the NRDC, real temporary workers will reach no more than 6,000, and permanent jobs would only cover 20 to 35. And studies from Cornell University state that only 2,500 to 4,650 jobs were to be created. Using the August 2011 chart for reference, if the pipeline was supposed to make 119,000 jobs divided into 40,000 for the next 3 years, it would still not lower the US unemployment rates and remain at 9.1%. The economy would need over 90,000 jobs per month to keep up with the labor force and 8 million jobs to lower the rates prior to the 2008 recession. Simply put, the pipeline would not drastically improve the current economy.
The short term benefits of the Keystone Pipeline project, like the temporary jobs created during construction, are exaggerated. After construction, only 20 to 35 permanent jobs will remain. These few jobs are small compared to the long term benefits we could get from investing in renewable energy. Also, while the pipeline might help transport oil, rail transport can do the same job more safely and without the environmental damage. Looking at the long term, U.S. energy production has already grown by 230% since the pipeline was first proposed. This shows that the energy industry is growing without the need for the Keystone Pipeline project. Since 2021, the US has been shifting towards renewable energy. which helps both the environment and the economy. Investing in clean energy like solar and wind could create stable and long term jobs. Research shows that investing $100 billion in renewables could create more than 160,000 jobs compared to the limited jobs the Keystone Pipeline would provide.
Aggregate expenditures. A project of this scale requires a substantial amount of investment and significant government funds in order to come to fruition. This investment is necessary not only for the direct costs associated with the construction itself, such as the wages for the labor force involved, but also the purchase of essential materials ranging from raw materials like steel, concrete, and asphalt to more specialized supplies for the project's needs. Additionally, there is considerable expenditure on capital goods, including work trucks, cranes, bulldozers, and heavy equipment, all which are crucial for the efficient and timely completion of the project. Behind these direct construction costs, the financial outlay expands to include the environmental mitigation measures required to address and combat the potential issues caused by the pipeline, such as measures to prevent soil erosion and protect local wildlife and their habitats. These additional environmental expenses, which are necessary to comply with regulatory standards and ensure the project meets sustainability criteria, further increase the burden on government spending. In total, the combined cost of labor, materials, capital goods, and climate related mitigation efforts add up to a significant financial commitment, with much of the funding coming from public, thereby contributing to the overall strain on government budgets.
Changes in budget and spending levels. We see massive budget changes between the start of the pipeline and its end life. When the project was brought back in 2020, the investment was held at $8 billion. The cost would pile up to $30.9 billion in 2023, and by the end, the project amounted to $34 billion. High cost of oil spills also contributes to the heavy budget. In the 12-year timeline, 12 spills have occurred where one spill creates 111 million in property damage, and the latest 2022 oil spill cost $480 million. What would this mean? As a result, this will only increase the country's national debt. Problems regarding high debt include interest paid, income redistribution of interest, lowers government ability to meet citizen needs, and increases power grabbing and wastefulness of government.
The Keystone Pipeline project brings serious financial risk for the banks involved. In 2020, big banks like JP Morgan Chase, Citi, and RBC helped fund this controversial project, but now they're facing growing public backlash. As more people and investors care about the environment, many are moving their money to banks that focus on sustainability. This could lead to loss of customers for banks supporting the pipeline. From an investor's point of view, there's growing focus on environmental, social, and governance or ESG factors. Banks backing the project might see a drop in investor trust, especially from those who want to support companies that help fight climate change. This could lead to less investment, hurting the bank's stock's prices and overall value. The damage to their reputation could also make it harder for them to raise money for future projects. In short, banks supporting the pipeline project face serious risks to their reputation, stock value, and ability to secure future funding, which could hurt them in the long term success.
Environmental impacts. The negative factors that significantly impact the environment through the development and construction of this pipeline, including harmful carbon emissions, oil spills, and the potential destruction of natural habitat, not only pose immediate environmental threats, but also shift the primary focus of government attention and resources onto addressing and mitigating these adverse consequences. The release of carbon emissions from construction machinery and the operation of the pipeline contributes to the worsening of climate change, while the risk of oil spills during transportation or from pipeline leaks can lead to long lasting contamination of soil, water sources, and wildlife. As these environmental risks become more apparent, the government is compelled to allocate considerable time, energy, and funding towards creating strategies for reducing these impacts, such as implementing more environmental safeguards, improving spill response systems, and investing in technologies that minimize the carbon footprint of the pipeline. Additionally, the government may face increased regulatory pressure from environmental groups and public, demanding stronger actions and enforcement measures to ensure that the environment damage caused by the pipeline is effectively contained and remediated.
Now we're going to talk about how does opposing the Keystone Pipeline affect U.S. trade relations with Canada. We have the impact on bilateral trade. The U.S. decision to oppose the Keystone Pipeline has strained relations with Canada, but it underscores the U.S. commitment to aligning its trade policy with environmental priorities. The U.S. policymakers view this as an opportunity to promote cleaner energy policies in their trade dealings with Canada. The decision to block the pipeline was seen as an effort to a long-standing trade partner which led to frustration and disappointment in Canada. It was perceived as a prioritization of U.S. environmental policy over a mutually beneficial economic project, straining the diplomatic ties. From the U.S. perspective, opposing the pipeline was part of a broader strategy to address climate change and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. This had the effect of pushing the two nations to focus on cleaner energy solutions and transition to green energy sources, potentially setting the stage for future trade collaborations centered around renewable energy. Now let's move on to how does opposing the Keystone Pipeline affects the exchange rate and balance of payments of the US. The decision to oppose the Keystone Pipeline could influence the value of the Canadian dollar relative to the US dollar. However, the impact of the exchange rate may not be straightforward. While the pipeline's opposition might contribute to a weakening of the CAD, broader factors such as global oil prices, overall economic conditions, and actions by central banks typically have a more significant influence on exchange rates. In terms of balance of payments, the US could see a potential improvement in its trade and current account if it reduces its reliance on Canadian oil imports. This could help reduce the trade deficit, particularly in energy sector, by shifting energy imports from Canada to other suppliers or reducing dependency on foreign oil. A reduction in oil imports may improve the US current account, which tracks trade in goods and services. Additionally, a shift in energy imports could alter capital flows and investment patterns. If the US invests in alternative energy technologies or increases domestic production, there could be a shift in capital inflows. The US may seek new energy investments, which could impact the capital account of the balance of payments, which tracks financial needs. Over the long term, the full impact on the balance of payments will depend largely on US energy policy. If the US accelerates its shift towards renewable energy sources or diversifies its energy imports, it could reduce dependency on oil imports and further improve its balance of payments. However, any changes in investment patterns or energy-related policies would need to be carefully managed to avoid disruptions in energy security or economic stability.
Revisiting physical policy, the key pipeline uses large amounts of government spending, which overall, the large amount of government spending contributes to high inflation and higher interest rates, which has a negative effect on the overall economy. Furthermore, relating to crowding out, further investments on the XL pipeline, we see the crowding out of investment spending. In terms of our neighbors, the Canada has spent 1.5 billion in funding the pipeline and a projected additional 6 billion in loans. It's unclear how much the US has spent funding the pipeline, but any great amount is too much as the government could have been spending on green fossil fuel energy or greater government projects which could have a more significant impact on our economy. Furthermore, relating to the topic of trading off between unemployment and the inflation levels, we see the relationship between the pipeline, as the pipeline offers numerous of temporary jobs and part-time jobs, which many trades professionals flock to for higher pay, although soon after they face great diversity, as these are only temporary or part-time jobs, needing to soon after find full-time employment. This furthermore reflects short-term employment and little job security, causing many to save their paychecks and creating economic inflation as there's overall leakage, as many of those tradesmen working on the pipeline have to save their money as they don't know how long these jobs may last. Chapter 13 will be walking through the 20th century and beyond on topics of employment, supply of labor and demand, and aggregate demand. Through the cycle of having the pipeline, we see the reflection of full-time equilibrium and the importance of full-time equilibrium, although most of these jobs are only part-time or temporary jobs, which have a negative impact on the overall economy. Furthermore, onto the supply of labor and demand, many economics or political professionals project 25,000 jobs plus, but this is far from the truth. There is only 3,900 jobs needed if the pipeline is constructed within a year, which is far less than the projected numbers, creating much of a surplus of labor and a shortage of demand, which has much of a negative impact for many. Before we conclude our presentation, we'll be speaking on our recommendations. Supporting and investing in clean energy over fossil fuels. Prioritize the protection of land, water, and indigenous rights. Reconsider the pipeline's approval by weighing economical issues against the long-term economical advantages. Examine the alternative energy incentives and minimize trade deficits. The United States should focus on creating clean, green energy jobs. And lastly, we see consider focusing more on environmental clean energy, which can significantly affect the economy in the long term than short term gains. In short term, many lives are negatively impacted, so we say you should go green. As we conclude our presentation, we see that anti-XL pipeline is for the greater of our nation as a whole, as there are many negative factors and negative impacts of having the XL pipeline relating to topics of climate change, protecting human rights, social, economical harm, and further balancing trade and environmental effects overall. As we have highlighted through our presentation, going through with the XL pipeline is just not the right decision overall. We must consider many of the factors we have highlighted in our presentation. Lastly, as we conclude, we'd just like to say we truly believe going green and having clean energy job is for the greater of our nation. Looking after climate and not having more negative effects of climate change is for the greater of us and the greater of our future. We as a whole, as a team, thank you for your time of listening and taking the careful time out of your day to hear our presentation. I thank you all and hope you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you.